Before we begin, a note to listeners. This episode discusses violence against Indigenous women and the death of a mother of five. If these topics are difficult for you, please proceed with caution. July 31st, 2018, Sanish Bay, North Dakota. Beneath 20 feet of murky water, something has been waiting. For 287 days, it has sat silent on the lake bed, hidden from search teams, from family, from federal agents. Until now. Volunteer investigator Lisa Yellowbird Chase has found what the FBI, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and tribal police could not locate for 9 months. A dark teal 2011 Chevy Silverado resting at the bottom of the bay. Dive teams connect tow straps to the shore-based winch. Hours of pulling, metal straining against water. Finally, the roof breaks the surface. Windows shattered, the vehicle groaning as it emerges from its grave. But inside, that's where this shifts from recovery to mystery. Olivia Lone Bear, 32-year-old mother of five, is still in the cab, but she isn't behind the wheel. She is buckled into the passenger seat. And that changes everything, because if Olivia didn't drive that truck into the water, who did? This is True Crime, Episode 21, Olivia Lone Bear. What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of True Crime. I'm your host, Drue V, and tonight I'm covering the cryptic case of Olivia Lone Bear. Details of this case have been scarce from the start, and since this is still an active investigation, I get that law enforcement can't reveal everything, but that necessary secrecy makes Olivia's story much harder to piece together than some of the other unsolved cases I've covered. Before we dive into Olivia's story, a quick note on sourcing. For those looking to dig deeper into the case or verify the information presented, you can find all my references in the episode description box. I also gathered significant information from Facebook, particularly from Olivia's brother Matthew Lone Bear, who played a commendable role in his searching for his sister. I did reach out to Matthew and a few others to confirm some details about this case, but understandably I did not hear back from anyone. Also, just to let everyone know, you can find all of my True Crime episodes on all major platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, and many more. I also have a True Crime YouTube channel where I post PowerPoint videos to go along with the episodes I publish. And if my channel is something that you enjoy or are interested in, please feel free to subscribe, like the videos, and leave any comments on the videos I post. Also, if you're someone who likes to discuss and has information about a case I should cover, or one that I've already covered, please feel free to email me at truecrimepodcast@gmail.com. One final note, Olivia Lone Bear's case remains open, and to date, no one has been charged with any crimes in connection with her death. And everyone discussed in this episode is presumed innocent unless proven guilty. Now let's get into who Olivia was and the systematic struggles Indigenous women still face in this country. I also apologize in advance if I mispronounce any names along the way. According to Olivia's obituary, Olivia Carrie Lone Bear, aka Cedar Woman, was born in Stanley, North Dakota on October 11, 1985, to her mother Iris Sherman Forbear and her father Harley Tex Lone Bear. She was a child of the Dripping Dirt clan, and Olivia received her Hadasta name from her Magoo or grandmother, Sophie Bell. The Hadasta are a Native American tribe primarily located in North Dakota, known for their rich cultural heritage and history. They are part of the Siouan language family and are closely related to the Mandan and Crow tribes. Olivia has a large family that consisted of her mother, who would unfortunately later pass, her father, two sisters, 4 brothers, a grandmother, many aunts and uncles, while also having 5 children of her own later on as well. Olivia's high school years spanned 3 states. She attended Newtown High School in North Dakota, then moved to Brockton, Montana for her sophomore year, and finished her junior year in Wellpinit, Washington. At 17, she gave birth to her first daughter, Haley, in 2003. To balance motherhood and academics, Olivia completed her diploma through independent study. She also stayed active in athletics, playing basketball and volleyball and running cross country. In 2005, Olivia welcomed her first son, Caleb, who tragically passed away 8 months later. Until 2009, Olivia split her time between Wellpinit, Washington, and Newtown, North Dakota, but by then Newtown had become her permanent home. She built a life working various jobs, dealing table games such as roulette, blackjack, poker, and craps at the Four Bears Casino and Lodge, and later working at the Edgewater Golf Course and the American Legion. During these years, she completed her family, welcoming her other children, JC, Layla, Dane, and Brody. Those who knew her described Olivia as a hard worker who was deeply devoted to her 5 children. Olivia enjoyed playing poker at the casinos, golfing, planning trips, and going to various concerts. She enjoyed going out with friends, hanging out with family, and just visiting and telling jokes. Olivia also held a great respect and love for her father. She also lived with him and loved spending time and taking care of him. Olivia had a beautiful smile and a loving personality. She was outgoing, smart, crazy, a loving person, and a best friend to many that knew her. So all in all, it seems that Olivia Lone Bear was a good person and mother who was very family-oriented, but also wasn't afraid of going out and having a good time either. And in the end, she has been deeply missed by those who loved her. Before we continue with the timeline, we need to understand the landscape Olivia lived in, and the systematic failures that would later define her search. The Fort Berthold Reservation sits within a complex jurisdictional maze that has left Indigenous women vulnerable for generations. To explain this better than I ever could, here is audio from a 2017 Democracy Now! Video featuring Mary Catherine Nagel, who is an enrolled citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, playwright, and attorney specializing in tribal sovereignty.
We have the highest rates across the United States, again, in Indian country, of violence, but in particular in North Dakota, where the rates of oil extraction have skyrocketed since 2005 in the Bakken oil boom. As a result of that, over 100,000 men from outside of the state of North Dakota have moved to the state of North Dakota to live in man camps that the oil companies have set up. The resulting rates of violence, drug, of course, and crime and burglary have skyrocketed, but also in particular domestic violence and sexual assault, including rape and sex trafficking. And numerous leaders, both at the state and federal level, have now noticed that North Dakota, some of the towns in North Dakota within the Bakken boom and some within the Fort Berthold Reservation, where Olivia is from, now have some of the highest rates of sex trafficking in the United States.
Nagel spoke about this again in August 2018 in another Democracy Now! Video, with cases like Olivia specifically in mind. She detailed how these jurisdictional gaps play out in real time.
Fortunately, in Indian country, in some reservations, our women are murdered at rates 10 times the national average. The rates of violence, whether you're talking about just domestic violence or sexual violence, are incredibly high against our Native women, but the rates of murder and the rates at which our women go missing are even higher, and that's been documented by the Department of Justice, United States attorneys, United States senators, who are fortunately now starting to propose legislation to deal with the crisis. But it is nothing less than a crisis when you think about the numbers and the percentages at which our women go missing and murdered. And you can see here just how problematic it is when our own tribal police don't know whether or not they have jurisdiction. In 1978, the United States Supreme Court stripped our nations of our inherent criminal jurisdiction over anyone who comes onto our lands and commit crimes. So that means that today, when a woman goes missing, if a Native woman goes missing, her tribal government cannot exercise any kind of police jurisdiction over that crime unless the government knows that the perpetrator was Native. And that's because the Supreme Court says we don't have jurisdiction over non-Natives who come onto our lands and kill our women or our children or really any tribal citizen. And depending on the circumstances, unfortunately, the federal legal framework around this has become incredibly complicated. And there have been pieces of jurisdiction that have been restored to tribal nations. For instance, in the 2013 reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. In that reauthorization, one piece was restored, and that's jurisdiction over domestic violence. So if a non-Indian commits a domestic violence crime, today tribal nations can prosecute that. However, murder was not restored. And so sex trafficking, that's another crime that our women suffer at disproportionate rates. If the perpetrator is believed to be non-Native, or if the tribal police cannot know with any kind of certainty that the perpetrator is Native, under federal law, they likely do not have jurisdiction to even arrest, let alone prosecute these crimes.
So after hearing that, the implications are clear. If this happened in a foreign country, we would call it an international incident. Here, it was built into the legal framework. The jurisdictional chaos didn't happen by accident. It was designed into the system. Also, this isn't a new problem. It traces back through decades of activism from the American Indian Movement of 1968 to today's Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Movement, MMIWG. The MMIWG movement works to end this epidemic by demanding justice, accountability, and an end to the colonial systems that enable violence while ignoring the missing and murdered. This context isn't just background noise, it's essential to understanding why Olivia's case unfolded the way it did, why the search stalled, why agencies pointed fingers at each other, and why her family found themselves fighting not just for answers, but against a system that seemed indifferent to their loss. I do have to point out here that some jurisdictional laws have progressed since 2018. As of July 1, 2025, the Fort Berthold District Court now exercises special tribal criminal jurisdiction over non-enrolled persons for specific covered crimes under the Violence Against Women Act 2022, which includes domestic violence, sexual violence, and sex trafficking, but only when the victim is an enrolled tribal member. However, this requires the tribe to provide state-level due process protections like appointed counsel and mixed juries, and criminal jurisdiction over non-Indians for other offenses still remains with federal and state authorities. So in the end, there is still much more work that needs to be done. So now to go ahead and start Olivia Lone Bear's story, our timeline begins on Tuesday, October 24, 2017. That evening, Olivia met up with friends at Sportsman's Bar on Main Street in Newtown, North Dakota. Witnesses recalled her being in good spirits, laughing, and visiting with her group. As the night wore down, Olivia told her friends she was tired and ready to head home. She drove off in a dark teal 2011 Chevy Silverado she had borrowed from Jim Hoffinke, a non-native oil field worker whom she'd met while working at the American Legion Bar and Grill roughly 6 years prior. But there is a crucial discrepancy here. While witnesses saw Olivia leave the bar, no one actually saw her get into the truck itself. They only saw the vehicle drive away. From what I understand, it has never been confirmed whether she left alone or with someone else. According to a later Dateline report, Olivia's brother Matthew was even asked not to comment on whether she was alone, as those details remain sensitive while the case is still active. After Olivia left the bar on the 24th, investigators later confirmed she appeared on surveillance footage at a local bank that same night, driving west on Main Street in the direction of Lake Sakakawea. There were also possible sightings at a liquor store in Newtown and at the Legion Bar and Grill, which was located catty-corner across Main Street from Sportsman's. This particular sighting came from a Facebook comment made by a student named Jalen, who claimed that Olivia's uncle Delray First had told his class that Olivia was last seen on camera leaving with a non-native guy from that establishment. However, only the bank surveillance has been definitively confirmed. Wednesday, October 25th, passed with no contact between Olivia and her family. They called her phone repeatedly but received no answer. While it wasn't unusual for Olivia to be gone for a day or two, her family noted she always kept them informed, so the silence was concerning. What they didn't know, information the Bureau of Indian Affairs would only later disclose, was that Olivia had apparently been seen driving around downtown Newtown between 5 and 7 p.m. that same day. But here's what the family also didn't know at the time. Olivia's phone was active Wednesday night. According to records revealed in May of 2022, shortly after 10 p.m., Olivia's phone sent 2 text messages to Jim Hoffenke. The first read, quote, "Well, we had a little bonfire, and now we're going mudding. Wish me luck," unquote. The use of the word "we" suggested she was not alone. Then at 10:24 p.m., a second text arrived to Jim that simply said, quote unquote, "Goodbye." At 10:37 p.m., her ex-boyfriend Adam Bangan received the final text from her phone, but the contents of that message have never been disclosed to the public. Then there was also some digital activity that was present from Olivia's phone on the night of the 25th, and at 11:24 p.m. her Facebook cover photo was changed to a picture of what looks like to be some of her children standing outside a home. Her account was then accessed again at 11:38 p.m., and after that timestamp, and as far as I know, all activity from Olivia's phone had ceased. By Thursday, October 26, with still no sign of her, her eldest brother Malachi took to Facebook posting, "Have you seen Olivia?" When Friday, October 27th brought no news, her father formally reported her missing to authorities. But here's where the timeline fractures into something stranger. After Olivia was reported missing, her family went through her room, and what they found and what they didn't find told a story that contradicted the idea that she simply vanished after leaving the bar. Sitting there in her bedroom were her wallet, her purse, her money, and the exact clothes she had worn to Sportsman's on the night of the 24th. Along with those items was a cell phone and an alleged goodbye note. But here's the complication. According to a post her brother Malachi made on Facebook on October 29th, 5 days since anyone had last seen Olivia, the family had come to believe that she might still have a second phone on her. This one started with a number 4. Malachi wrote that while this second phone was the one they believed she was carrying, he had the first phone, the one starting with 5, in his possession, and he was going through it looking for information. So the reason I bring up the phones is because I was under the impression that Olivia only had one phone. So I thought it was very suspicious that Olivia was able to make those texts to Jim and Adam and access her Facebook on the night of the 25th. And then after all these things were done on her phone, it then somehow made its way back into their house unnoticed. So in conclusion to these 2 phones, I now do think it's very likely Olivia did come home after the bar on the 24th and change clothes into something more suitable to possibly go mudding in. And then when she left again, she decided to leave most of her personal belongings behind, except for her second phone, that her brother was led to believe she still may have on her. Which in my opinion does make sense that she in fact did. Now I do have a problem about this whole mudding thing in the first place, so I will be mentioning this again later on in the episode when I get into theories on this case. So then there's the matter of the alleged goodbye note. According to a 2017 HPR article, Jim Hoffenke, who asked his name not to be printed in the article, described the alleged note as quote-unquote horrifying and quote, "It's not an 'I love you kids and see you in a little bit' note. It's in her words too," unquote. He claimed it contained pets' names like Mazeballs, a term of endearment for her children, expressions of hope that her children would continue seeing each other, and the stark conclusion, quote, "The note says she's leaving forever, I love you kids, and that's it," unquote. But here lies a critical conjecture to this alleged note. Law enforcement has never confirmed this note exists, and they've never disclosed its contents to the public. From what I understand, Olivia never showed any signs of wanting to leave her children. There were no signs of her wanting to leave and take her own life, and never any signs of some type of mental illness. and I'll talk more about this note later on when I get into my theories on this case. So after putting it all together, the clothes left behind, the first phone left behind, the wallet and ID left behind, it all suggests Olivia didn't disappear straight from the bar. It looks like she came home sometime after the 24th, changed out of her bar clothes into something else, left her personal effects behind, and walked back out the door with only that second phone. The one that started with a 4. The one that would send those cryptic messages hours later before disappearing entirely. So the days following October 27th birthed a desperate 9-month odyssey led not by law enforcement but by Olivia's own family. What began as a missing person report turned into a grueling demonstration of institutional neglect met only by familial resilience. The inertia was immediate and devastating. According to Olivia's brother Matthew Lone Bear, the 3 affiliated tribes police department treated Olivia's disappearance with a staggering lack of urgency. They didn't initiate any search until the following Monday, 4 days after she had vanished, and an organized effort failed to materialize until Wednesday, November 1st. By then, 6 days of critical time had evaporated. The obstacles weren't merely bureaucratic, they were actively obstructive. As detailed in a 2018 High Country News article, when the family begged tribal police to search Lake Sacagawea before winter ice sealed its secrets, the North Dakota Game and Fish Department offered their sonar equipment to aid the effort. The tribal police declined it. Simultaneously, they insisted they possessed no boats capable of water searches. It took Matthew posting photographic evidence on Facebook, images of multiple watercraft sitting idle in the police supply yard, to spark public outcry and force a reversal. By December 2017, when authorities finally conducted their limited water search, they operated without sonar equipment while the lake crystallized around them. They found nothing. Also during this time, because of the coming harsh conditions and temperatures, volunteers that had been helping with searches were starting to diminish as well. So after receiving what seemed to be insufficient help from law enforcement, Olivia's family became the primary investigators. They established their own command center, complete with a tip line. They deployed drones against the vast terrain and navigated four-wheelers through rough backcountry. After it was all said and done, they crisscrossed nearly 1 million acres, often on foot, expanding their grid beyond Newtown into distant cities including Bismarck, which was 2 hours away. Volunteers materialized from Montana, Minnesota, and South Dakota, drawn by the family's relentless advocacy. According to BBC News coverage, Matthew eventually coordinated with at least 10 different government agencies, including the FBI, which joined the investigation belatedly. Yet even federal involvement proved frustratingly short-lived. Matthew described it as a revolving door of agents, some assigned to the case for just mere weeks at a time. Then in February 2018, there was a shift in this case, when the Bureau of Indian Affairs assumed lead authority from the tribal police with FBI assistance, but jurisdiction alone couldn't summon competence. By March 2018, as spring thaw softened Lake Sacagawea's surface, both the BIA and FBI stood paralyzed, each agency pointing at the other regarding whose responsibility it was to deploy boats. Neither did. In response, the family simply resumed operations themselves, relaunching their volunteer search in late April. By July 2018, several months had passed and summer had arrived. An amateur sleuth and advocate for missing indigenous persons named Lisa Yellowbird Chase decided to search Lake Sacagawea herself, bringing along a few volunteers. Lisa had been helping Olivia's family since the beginning of the search, but the two parties had since fallen out, and the family had asked her to step back. Now she and her team were conducting this effort independently. They were equipped with a 14-foot boat with a half-broken motor and fishing sonar, equipment that uses sound waves to create real-time images of the underwater environment. Now, to give you a better understanding of the layout of Lake Sacagawea, the lake itself stretches approximately 178 miles upstream from the Garrison Dam and boasts over 1,500 miles of shoreline. and it was created by impounding the Missouri River with the Garrison Dam. The creation of the lake resulted in the flooding of several towns including Sanish and Van Hook, which now lie beneath its waters. The lake follows the path of the former Missouri River Valley, creating a long winding shape, and includes various arms and bays such as the Sanish Bay where Lisa and her volunteers were searching for Olivia. So Lisa started scanning the waters of Sanish Bay, which is about 3.5 miles west of Newtown. Back and forth she went, pushing further from the shoreline with each pass. Then roughly 400 feet out and 21 feet down, the sonar painted a picture that didn't belong in the water. A perfect rectangle, too symmetrical for rock, too large for debris. Lisa snapped a photograph and sent it to Keith Cormicon, a technical diver and certified underwater sonar operator in Wisconsin. His advice was specific. Return at different times of day, catch the shifting shadows, and let the light define what the sonar had found. She followed his instructions, capturing new angles that revealed what looked in the pixelated image like a tiny Tonka truck suspended in the depths. She forwarded those images to Corey Bristol, the chief deputy of the Montreal County Sheriff's Office. Bristol stared at his phone screen, recognizing the shape immediately. He contacted North Dakota Game and Fish, then reached out to Sergeant Ben White at the Williams County Sheriff's Office, the closest jurisdiction with a dive team. White didn't hesitate. "There's the wheels, there's the windshield," he said. "I see it, we're going to pull a vehicle tomorrow." So the following morning, July 31st, the shoreline transformed into a command scene. Officers from Williams County, Montreal County, the Bureaus of Indian Affairs, and North Dakota Game and Fish gathered as a dive team prepared to enter the water. On shore, a tow truck positioned itself at the water's edge, an extra long tow strap ready for the deep. It took hours of slow, grinding effort, metal against water, winches straining against the weight, but eventually the roof of a pickup truck broke the surface, water streaming off dark teal paint. It was the 2011 Chevy Silverado, license plate 839-BRC, the same truck Jim Hoffinke had lent to Olivia 9 months earlier. When officers peered into the cab, the 9-month search for Olivia Lone Bear had ended, but the mystery to it all had only deepened. They knew the body was Olivia's, which was later identified by her tattoos, but the position she was in defied any accident scenario, any suicide theory, or any explanation that really made sense. She wasn't behind the wheel, she was buckled into the passenger seat. Every window in the truck had been shattered, and when the autopsy came back, it offered no comfort, only more questions. The medical examiner couldn't determine a definitive cause. Neither traumatic injury, nor natural causes, nor toxicological explanation could be confirmed. And critically, as far as the records show, there was no water in her lungs. So it seems that Olivia Lone Bear did not drown, so I believe there's a strong possibility she was likely already dead when the truck sank into the Sanish Bay, and she almost certainly hadn't driven herself there. After Olivia's body had been discovered, identified, and then examined, the family would then put her to rest about a week after she was found. And still to this day, no one has ever been charged with any crimes related to Olivia Lone Bear's death. Now that we know how Olivia's story transpired, let's talk about the people closest to her in her final hours, and the ones who drew attention from both her family and law enforcement. First, there's Jim Hoffinke. He's the non-native oil field worker who owned the dark teal Silverado, the one that is believed to have spent 9 months at the bottom of Sanish Bay. Jim was significantly older than Olivia, and the two had known each other for about 6 years from working together at the American Legion Bar and Grill. He described their relationship as casual, calling her his quote-unquote running buddy, a term suggesting friendship without romantic commitment, and told High Country News that he lent her his truck whenever she needed it. According to Jim, on the day Olivia disappeared, October 24th, she texted him saying she was doing laundry at her father's house on Highway 23. He claimed he later drove by to drop off groceries, but no one answered the door. Despite the trust they seemed to share, and despite Jim being one of the last people to receive texts from Olivia's phone, while her family heard nothing after the 24th, law enforcement ultimately cleared him of any wrongdoing after searching his property and examining his phone records. But that clearance came with gaps. I haven't found any information establishing Jim's whereabouts on the night of the 24th or the following day, the 25th, when that final goodbye text was sent. Given that he continued hearing from Olivia while her family was cut off, it's easy to understand why they pressed him so aggressively for answers. To elaborate more on the family's suspicions, we return to the Facebook comment from Jalen, the student who first mentioned the Legion Bar sighting. According to Jalen, Olivia's uncle Delray first told his class that Delray's own brother had gone to Jim Hoffinke's house and threatened him for answers. Jim, by this account, denied knowing anything about Olivia's death. There's also reported detail that Jim tried to reactivate the OnStar service in his truck after it and Olivia both went missing, but someone at OnStar allegedly told him it had already been deactivated for too long. This appears to have been a straightforward attempt to locate his vehicle, and understandable given that a missing woman was last seen driving it. My research into OnStar's technical limitations reveals he couldn't have succeeded regardless. By 2018, the 2G network his 2011 truck relied on was being sunsetted, and even if it weren't, his truck being submerged in Sanish Bay would have destroyed the OnStar equipment and blocked any signal. Next is Adam Bangan. He's the ex-boyfriend who received the final text at 10:37 p.m. on October 25th, the one whose contents have never been disclosed to the public. I couldn't find much else about Adam in my research, and when I reached out to him via Facebook for comment, understandably I did not receive a response. And then there's the shadow figure, the unknown non-native male allegedly seen with Olivia at the Legion Bar and Grill on the night of the 24th. This comes from that same Facebook comment thread involving Jalen and Delray first. According to this account, Olivia was seen on camera leaving the Legion with this man. Again, the Legion sits diagonally across Main Street from Sportsman's Bar. Plausible if she stopped there after telling friends she was going home. If this sighting is correct, and if law enforcement correctly cleared Jim Hoffinke, then in my opinion, this unidentified man could very well represent the remaining loose thread in Olivia's final hours. Also, Jalen's Facebook comment went further, stating that both Jim and this other non-native man should be considered prime suspects in this case. With Jim being cleared, this other individual remains a ghost in the investigation, perhaps already identified and pursued by law enforcement. But for the public, it's simply another element of Olivia's case that remains shrouded in mystery. So next I'm going to move into some speculated theories that I have about Olivia's death. And now comes the hard part, the why. We know the what and the where, but after 7 years we're still grasping at the who and the how. I've spent months combing through evidence, and honestly I keep circling back to 3 possible scenarios. None of them fit perfectly, but each has threads that pull at different parts of this case. So for theory 1, possible suicide. On the surface, there are breadcrumbs that suggest Olivia may have intentionally walked away from her life. There's the final text to Jim at 10:24 made on the 25th with just the single word, goodbye. Then there's Olivia's Facebook cover photo being changed at 11:24 p.m. to an image of her children standing outside their home. A possible digital farewell? And of course, there's the alleged note found on her dresser, described by Jim Hoffinke as containing intimate pet names like maze balls, and ending with the stark declaration that she was, quote-unquote, leaving forever. The complete radio silence from a woman who normally checked in with her kids constantly could suggest a deliberate severing of ties. However, this whole goodbye note raises significant questions. Did it appear freshly written? Was it dated? Could anyone else have known these personal details it contained? The note itself remains unverified. Law enforcement has never disclosed its contents, and Jim appears to be the only source that I could find who acknowledged its existence. So it very well may even predate her disappearance entirely, written during an earlier emotional moment rather than as a final farewell. but until confirmed otherwise, it really just adds uncertainty rather than clarity. But here's where this theory frays for me. According to family and friends, Olivia showed zero signs of wanting to abandon her children. She was deeply devoted to them. There was also no history of mental illness, no depression, no suicidal ideation that anyone noticed. And then there's the physical impossibility. If Olivia drove herself to Sanish Bay to end her life, why on earth would she buckle herself into the passenger seat? It's inconsistent with suicide by vehicular submersion. While not technically impossible, that detail hangs like a question mark over this entire theory. Now for theory 2, a possible accident followed with a cover-up. This one feels a lot more plausible, a tragic mistake compounded by panic. And whoever she was with decided not to do the right thing and inform her family and law enforcement about what happened, in fear of facing some kind of repercussions for their actions. I do speculate it's possible that Olivia left the bar intoxicated on the 24th, either alone or meeting the non-native man reportedly seen at the Legion bar, then drove west down Main Street, which was captured by bank surveillance, then stopped briefly at home to change into clothes suitable for mudding without alerting her family. She then proceeded to Lake Sacagawea, where alcohol consumption continued, and at some point someone suggested taking Jim's truck mudding near the lake, where the driver lost control and plunged into Sanish Bay. This theory suggests the truck's broken windows resulted from high-speed water impact consistent with an uncontrolled entry rather than gradual submersion. Though Olivia remained buckled into the passenger seat, she may have struck her head, rendering her unconscious and was unable to escape. Then the driver possibly escaped the cab but failed to free her. If her body was indeed underwater for 9 months, that length of time would have obscured forensic evidence. Extended submersion washes away trace evidence and compromises soft tissue, making it difficult to detect signs of trauma or foul play. While I'm not a medical professional by any means, I have linked relevant forensic pathology research from the National Library of Medicine in the episode description box for those interested in how aquatic decomposition affects autopsy findings. Then from there, a cover-up component proposes the driver, fearing legal consequences. They somehow fled with Olivia's phone, sent the text to Jim and Adam, accessed her Facebook to stage a voluntary disappearance, and have been able to conceal their involvement ever since. But there is one main problem that I do have with this possible theory, and from what I have read, law enforcement interviewed certain people during their investigation that I believe personally knew Olivia, and none of these people interviewed knew or heard anything about anyone going mudding. So that's not to say that Olivia and whoever else she was with didn't end up going mudding at some point, but for now, I find this to be interesting that no one else seemed to be able to recall this ever occurring. So in the end, I do speculate that some kind of accident theory could be fairly plausible in this case, but since we don't even know if Olivia actually went mudding or not, it's just too hard to say that this may have been the result of her passing. And this will lead me into my final speculated theory before I close out the episode. And thank you to everyone that has made it this far with me. So for theory 3, I suspect foul play may have been the result of Olivia's death. This is the one I keep returning to, the one that fits the jagged edges of this case. As Mary Catherine Nagel laid out in those Democracy Now! Clips, Indigenous women experience rates of violence 10 times higher than other populations. The North Dakota oil boom brought an influx of non-native transient workers to the Fort Berthold Reservation, creating exactly the kind of jurisdictional gray area where predators know they can operate with impunity. Add to that the witness account, however unconfirmed, of Olivia being seen with a non-native man at the Legion bar, and the statistical reality that non-native men are most likely to perpetrate violence against native women than native men are. Olivia Lone Bear fit every statistical vulnerability. Indigenous, female, living in the oil boom shadow, and possibly last seen in the company of an unidentified non-native man. So here's how I think it might have played out. Olivia leaves the bar or meets someone later, possibly that non-native man from the Legion. She returns home, changes clothes, leaves her wallet and one of her phones behind, and takes the second phone, the one starting with a 4, when she leaves again. Then she ends up at Lake Sacagawea with this person or persons. Something goes wrong, perhaps an assault, perhaps she witnesses something, or perhaps this was targeted violence from the start. She's then knocked unconscious, then deliberately buckled into the passenger seat of Jim's truck. The assailant keeps her phone on dry land, drives the vehicle to the edge of Sanish Bay, and sends it into the water with Olivia inside. Then comes the staging. The text to Jim and Adam to muddy the waters, the Facebook cover photo to suggest she's alive and saying goodbye, the careful deletion of evidence. Once those digital breadcrumbs are laid, the phone is destroyed or discarded. I've never found confirmation that the second phone, the one starting with 4, was ever recovered, and if it wasn't, that would explain why law enforcement only has records of activity rather than the device itself. Then a possible 9 months underwater does the rest, washing away DNA, fingerprints, and whatever trace evidence might have survived. And the motive? If it was foul play, maybe Olivia had somehow gotten herself mixed up in some kind of trouble, but I keep coming back to jealousy instead. There's certainly nothing in my research that confirms this may have been the cause, but violence rooted in jealousy, if I can't have her, no one can, would explain why someone would go to such elaborate lengths to dispose of her, stage the scene, and to bury the truth beneath 20 feet of water. But there's history here worth noting, and I'm not quite sure when this incident occurred, but while Olivia was working at Ranchman's 23 Steakhouse and Saloon in Newtown, she was assaulted by the wife of an ex-boyfriend, beaten and repeatedly slammed onto the pool table. The incident itself cost Olivia her job. Now, whether this involved Anna Bangan, which I think is very unlikely, or another former partner, isn't clear from my research, but it establishes that Olivia had faced violence from someone connected to a past relationship. Ultimately, the passenger seat is what haunts me. I very much speculate that someone put her there, someone buckled her in, someone drove that truck into the bay. And until someone can possibly figure out who may have done this, Olivia's family waits without closure. So in conclusion to all of these theories, as of right now I do speculate that the foul play theory makes the most sense in this case, given what we know about the environment Olivia was living in, and some of the people she may have been associated with. Also, the fact that she was buckled into the passenger side of a vehicle submerged in the bottom of a bay. I feel other theories just don't quite add up like this one does, and that someone had to or most likely put her there in that bay. And if they did in fact do so, then the big question here is, why? Olivia Carey Lone Bear was a 32-year-old single mother of 5, and to this day her case remains open and active, with no individual ever having been charged in connection with her disappearance or death. There have been glimmers of potential progress. Someone did come forward claiming to possess information about this case, but they stipulated that they would only divulge what they knew to law enforcement on the condition of remaining completely anonymous. Despite this potential lead, no breakthrough has materialized from this claim. The FBI continues to offer a reward up to $10,000 for any person providing independently verifiable information identifying the individual or individuals responsible. So if you or anyone you know has information about Olivia's death, please contact your local FBI office, reach out to the nearest American embassy or consulate, or submit tips anonymously online at tips.fbi.gov. It's now been over 7 years since Olivia was found deceased at the bottom of Sanish Bay, and I'm certain her family is more than ready to find the answers they have been desperately seeking since that discovery. So I urge you, keep sharing Olivia Lone Bear's story. Keep giving the case the attention it deserves, because someday someone may finally come forward with the key that unlocks the truth, allowing Olivia's loved ones to find the justice and closure they have been denied for far too long. So with that, this concludes my coverage of the Olivia Lone Bear case. And again, if you have any information that could help bring justice to Olivia's family, please contact the FBI. Every detail matters, and every tip could be the one that breaks this case open. To everyone who has listened through to the end, thank you. To everyone who continues to support my content, it means everything. We'll definitely be seeing you all here again soon, and as always, my friendly reminder, love everyone, but trust no one. I'm your host, Drue, and this has been another episode of Drue Crime.